Imagine for a moment that it is January 3rd, 2026. It is exactly 2:01 a.m. in Caracas, Venezuela. American military helicopters touch down under the cover of darkness. 30 minutes later, the operation is complete. Billions of dollars in oil reserves ostensibly change hands. The news networks call it a victory for democracy. They call it a necessary stabilization of energy markets. But if you are watching the news, you are looking in the wrong direction. Because while the world is distracted by the raid in South America, something far more terrifying is happening right here at home. At that exact same moment, thousands of miles away in Washington, D.C., a different kind of switch is flipped. There are no helicopters. There are no explosions. There is just a silent update to the banking ledger code. And in that split second, the money in your bank account ceases to be your property. It transforms from an asset you own into a government voucher that you are merely allowed to use. This scenario I just described sounds like science fiction, sounds like a dystopian thriller. But I am here to tell you that the raid on Venezuela is just a symptom of a dying empire. The real story is not about oil. It is not even about the $38 trillion national debt. Those are just the smoke. The fire is the solution they have already built to save themselves from that debt. Most people think the government is terrified of an economic collapse. They think the Federal Reserve is up at night worrying about a default. You are wrong. They are not afraid of the collapse. They are counting on it. Because a collapse is the only event chaotic enough to make you accept what comes next. In 1933, President Franklin D. Roosevelt signed Executive Order 6102. With the stroke of a pen, he criminalized the possession of gold by American citizens. He forced you to hand over your real wealth in exchange for paper money that he could then devalue. It was the greatest theft in American history up to that point. But in 2026, they will not come to your house to take your gold. They do not need to confiscate physical assets anymore. They have found a much more efficient way. They are going to confiscate your purchasing power, your privacy, and your freedom of choice. And they are going to do it with a technology that is being rolled out right now while you sleep. It is called a central bank digital currency, or CBDC, if you think this is just digital money. Like the dollars in your Venmo account, you are sleepwalking into a digital prison. Over the next 20 minutes, I'm going to show you the documents they hope you never read. I'm going to show you the white papers from the Federal Reserve and the IMF that lay out the blueprint. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is a forensic analysis of a crime scene where the weapon has already been loaded. The empire is collapsing, yes. But the trap they have built for you is just opening its jaws. The context, the mathematical impossibility to understand why this trap is inevitable. We have to look at the math. Numbers do not lie, even when politicians do. Let's look at the balance sheet of the United States of America. We are currently staring at a national debt that is accelerating past $36 trillion. That number is so large, it is abstract. So let's make it concrete. The interest payments alone on that debt, just the interest. Not the principal hit $1.133 trillion in fiscal year 2024. Let that sink in for a second. $1.1 trillion. That is more than we spend on the entire national defense budget. It is more than we spend on Medicare. We are borrowing money just to pay the interest on the money we already borrowed. This is what economists call a debt spiral. It is a mathematical point of no return. Historically, when an empire reaches this stage, there are only two ways out. Option 1 is a hard default. The government simply stops paying its bills. The bond market collapses. The credit rating goes to zero. The global supply chain halts. This leads to immediate chaos, loss of superpower status, and likely a revolution. The elites in Washington will never choose this option because it ends their power. Option 2 is hyperinflation. They print the money to pay the debt. They print so much that the dollar becomes worthless paper. Think of Weimar Germany. Think of Zimbabwe. This wipes out the debt, but it also wipes out the middle class. It destroys the social contract. It leads to riots in the street when a loaf of bread costs $100. The government fears this option too, because hungry people are dangerous people. So, they need a third option. They need a way to default on the debt without admitting they are defaulting. They need a way to create inflation to burn away the debt, but control how you spend money so it doesn't trigger a hyperinflationary spiral. They need total control over the velocity of money. This is where the new infrastructure comes in. You may have heard of FedNow. The Federal Reserve launched it recently as a strictly technical upgrade. They told you it was to make payments faster. They told you it was for your convenience so you can send money instantly, 24/7. And strictly speaking, that is true. FedNow is a payment rail. Think of it like a new system of pipes installed under your house. Right now, water is flowing through those pipes. That water represents the current digital dollar, the money created by commercial banks. But the pipes were not built just for the water. They were built to carry something else entirely. They were built to carry a new substance that the Federal Reserve is preparing to pump into the system. That substance is the central bank digital currency. FedNow is the infrastructure. CBDC is the payload. They have laid the pipes. They have tested the pressure. And now they are waiting for the right crisis to turn the valve. The mechanism, the digital cage. So, what exactly makes a CBDC so dangerous? Why is it different from the numbers you see on your banking app screen right now? The difference is fundamental. The money in your bank account today is a liability of a commercial bank. It is a promise from your bank to pay you cash if you ask for it. A central bank digital currency is a liability of the Federal Reserve itself. It cuts out the middleman, creates a direct digital tether between you and the state. And unlike cash, which is an inert bearer asset, a CBDC is software. It is programmable code. And because it is code, it can be rewritten at any time by the people who control the server. This is not speculation. Let me quote directly from Agustin Carstens. He is the general manager of the Bank for International Settlements, the central bank of central banks. In a video conference that was meant for insiders, he said the following words. Quote, "We do not know who is using a $100 bill today, and we do not know who is using a 1,000 peso bill today. The key difference with the CBDC is the central bank will have absolute control on the rules and regulations that will determine the use of that expression of central bank liability. And we will have the technology to enforce that." End quote. Absolute control. Those are his words, not mine. So how will they use this absolute control? Let's look at the three mechanisms of the trap. Mechanism number 1 is programmability. In this new system, money is not neutral. It can be programmed with permissions. Imagine you go to the gas station, you try to pay, but the transaction is declined. Not because you don't have enough money, but because you have already exceeded your carbon footprint allowance for the month. Imagine you try to buy ammunition. Declined, non-essential purchase detected. Imagine you try to donate to a political candidate that the current administration labels as a threat to. Democracy declined. Suspicious activity detected. Your money becomes a tool of behavioral modification. Mechanism number 2 is expiration dates. This is the ultimate weapon against a recession. Right now, when the economy slows down, you get scared. You stop spending. You save your money. This is rational behavior for you, but it is a disaster for a debt-based economy that relies on consumption. With a CBDC, they can solve this instantly. The government sends you a stimulus check of 2,000 digital dollars. But there is a catch. The code attached to that money says it must be spent within 30 days. If you do not spend it, it vanishes. It deletes itself from your ledger. You cannot save it. You cannot invest it. You become a rat in a wheel, forced to consume just to stay alive. They can force the velocity of money to whatever speed they want. Mechanism number 3 is negative interest rates. This is the end game for the debt problem. To wipe out the massive national debt, they need to keep interest rates far below the rate of inflation. In a normal world, if the bank charges you negative interest, meaning they take money out of your account just for holding it there, you would pull your cash out. You would put it under your mattress. But in a CBDC world, cash is banned or severely restricted. There is no mattress, there is no escape. They can deduct 2%, 3%, or 5% of your savings every year instantly. They call it a stability fee. In reality, it is automated confiscation. It is a wealth tax that requires no legislation and no IRS audit. It just happens, algorithmically. The lock-in, the digital Berlin Wall. Now, you might be thinking, I won't let this happen. I will just buy gold. I will buy Bitcoin. I will move my money to Switzerland. And that brings us to the most dangerous part of this transition, the lock-in. The government knows that when they introduce a surveillance currency, people will try to flee. They know that capital goes where it is treated best. So, before they spring the trap, they have to close the exits. We are already seeing the precursors to this. It is called financial repression, and it starts with capital controls. Look at what happened in Nigeria recently. Nigeria launched the Naira, their version of a CBDC. Nobody wanted to use it. The people preferred cash. So what did the government do? They didn't just advertise the Naira, they limited cash withdrawals. They made it impossible to take more than a small amount of your own money out of the bank per week. They created an artificial scarcity of cash to force adoption of the digital system. Riots broke out. But the government held the line. Look at what happened in Canada during the trucker protests. The government invoked the Emergencies Act. They didn't arrest everyone. They did something more effective. They ordered banks to freeze the accounts of anyone involved in the protest without a court order. 210 bank accounts were frozen. Credit cards stopped working. People could not buy food. They could not pay rent. They were unpersoned by the banking system. That was a trial run. That was a proof of concept. In the United States, we are seeing Operation Choke 2.0. Regulators are quietly pressuring banks to cut off ties with crypto companies, to cut off ties with gun manufacturers, to cut off ties with precious metals dealers. They are narrowing the on-ramps and off-ramps. When the crisis hits, when that stage 6 fiscal dominance finally breaks the bond market, the capital controls will come swiftly. You will wake up one morning to an executive order. It will state that in the interest of national security and currency stability, the purchase of gold is temporarily suspended. It will state that international wire transfers above $500 require special approval from the Treasury. It will state that converting dollars into cryptocurrency is banned to prevent money laundering. They will build a digital Berlin Wall around your wealth. And once you are trapped inside, the conversion to CBDC will not be voluntary. It will be mandatory. Your existing bank deposits will be converted at a 1-to-1 ratio. And just like that, you are in the system. The trap snaps shut. They escape the uncancelable portfolio. I know this is heavy. I know this keeps you up at night. It keeps me up at night too. But knowledge is only power if you act on it. The window of opportunity is closing, but it is not locked yet. You still have time to build what I call the uncancelable portfolio. The goal of this portfolio is simple. You need assets that have no counterparty risk. Assets that do not rely on a bank, a server, or a government permission slip to exist. The first pillar is physical gold and silver. I am not talking about an ETF. I am not talking about a paper contract that claims you own gold in a vault in London. I am talking about metal you can hold in your hand. Gold is the enemy of the CBDC. It is private. It is untraceable. It has been a store of value for 5,000 years. When the digital system goes totalitarian, Gold is the currency of the free market. Focus on small denominations, silver coins, fractional gold. Things that can be used for barter in a worst-case scenario. The second pillar is cash. While cash still exists, hold it. Do not keep 6 months of emergency funds in the bank. Keep a significant portion of it in physical bills at home in a secure safe. When the banking holidays happen then, they will happen. Cash will be king for the first few weeks of chaos. It buys you time. It buys you bread when the credit card terminals are down. The third pillar is self-custody crypto. Now, I know some of you are skeptical of Bitcoin, but you have to understand it as a technology of freedom. But this is a massive but if. Your crypto is on an exchange like Coinbase or Binance. You do not own it. The government can freeze that just as easily as a bank account. You must learn how to use a hardware wallet. Cold storage. This takes your assets off the grid. It makes them unseizable unless they physically wrench the password from your mind. And finally, you need to invest in the parallel economy. Build relationships with local farmers. Build relationships with mechanics. Build networks of trust that do not depend on the digital grid. If you can trade skills for food, you are immune to their expiration dates. If you can trade silver for fuel, you are immune to their programmability. The system wants you dependent. Your only defense is independence. We are living through a historical pivot point. Generations from now, they will look back at this decade as the moment the West transitioned from a society of citizens to a society of subjects. The raid on Venezuela, the rising debt, the sticky inflation, these are all just the background noise. The signal is the change in the money itself. I want to leave you with a question that I want you to ask yourself every time you tap your card to pay for coffee. If the government has the power to turn off your ability to buy food because you didn't obey a decree, is the money in your account really yours? Or are you just being allowed to hold a voucher that belongs to the state? The answer to that question determines your future. The walls are going up. But there are still places in the world that are fighting back. There are states passing laws to ban CBDCs. There are countries that are building firewalls against the digital prison. I am currently compiling a confidential list of these sanctuary jurisdictions. This is the geography of freedom. In my next video, I'm going to reveal exactly where you should consider moving your capital land, perhaps even yourself, to escape the dragnet. You cannot afford to miss that briefing. So click the subscribe button. Turn on the notifications. Because the system is moving fast and you need to move faster. The greatest wealth transfer in history is not just about money changing hands. It is about freedom changing hands. Do not let them take yours. I'll see you in the next video.